Hi, it's Steve Kendall. I want to welcome everybody to our second live show on Lift the Stigma. Today, I have the privilege to have Frank Lucas here to tell an amazing story from the beginning of opioid addiction to recovery. But first, I'd like to ask everybody to take a minute and remember on the anniversary of 9/11, all the Americans that died in the most horrific terrorism attack ever in the history of our country. And the brave people that downed that plane in Pennsylvania, saving other Americans' lives, hello Cheryl, to save other Americans' lives to prevent further Americans' deaths. We all need to say a prayer for these people and their families. Thank you. Also, I'd like to bring up a subject that I'd really like everybody to think about and help with. Let me see. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read the prompt here. I'm still getting to learn how this system works. The Slacker family, owners of Purdue Pharma and subsidiary companies, are about to file bankruptcy after they insulted the American people, offering a $12 billion settlement for all the current cases pending against them for lighting the fire on the worst medical crisis in our history with the opioid crisis. There's a terminology legally called criminal intent to harm. It falls into a category where if somebody willingly knows that what they're about to do is going to cause harm or injury to somebody, or even death, it's a crime. So my question is, why aren't all of us, or why aren't attorneys or U.S. attorneys throughout this whole country filing criminal charges against the slackers? You know, they're prepared to walk into court and they're going to walk out with billions of dollars to go back to their yachts, their fancy homes, their garage full of cars, and it's just not right. These people need to be in jail. Tomorrow, I'm going to make it a point to go down to Fairfax Federal Court and go into the U.S. Prosecutor's office and ask him plainly why. Why are you guys not filing criminal charges against the slackers? And if I have to get on the phone and call every U.S. attorney and every state, I will do so. I'm coming after you slackers. And the problem is, as big a nightmare as I am, I'm not going to be coming alone. There's strength in numbers, and you're about ready to find the power of that strength. I want to thank you all for that. And, take some time. It won't take long. Pick up your phone. Call your own U.S. district attorney in your state and say, why are you going to let these people get away with this? They've killed more Americans than all the Americans that have died in every conflict since World War II. They don't need to get to walk out of a bankruptcy court with billions of dollars. They need to be put in jail. Now, with that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Frank Lucas, who's got an amazing story about recovery. Go ahead, Frank.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. My name is Frank Lucas. I'm 32 years old. I have been in recovery and sober and drug-free for almost 3 years. I'll have 3 years sober on October 4th of this year. Prior to that, I was addicted to drugs and alcohol for 16 years. Didn't start out that way, in my childhood. I had a great childhood. Both of my parents were police officers. My mom went to law school in Boston. I had all these things, kind of set out for me to do things the right way. I think I was predisposed to alcoholism and drug addiction through my genetics, through family. And I was always warned about the risk of my addiction. I moved from Boston, Massachusetts to Blacksburg, Virginia when I was 12 years old. I think it was a big culture shock for me. I wasn't really sure how to fit in. And that's when I started drinking. I was a pretty heavy alcoholic as a teenager. I had been arrested almost 10 times by the time I was 18 years old. First time I got prescribed opiates was from a car accident when I was 17. I broke my L4, L5, collapsed lung, broken ribs. And I remember the way that they made me feel, and I think I remember abusing them, from the first time of, being prescribed them, because I was already an alcoholic and an addict. I quit drinking. I was court ordered to go to a rehab when I was 18 years old. Alcohol was my problem. I quit drinking when I was 18, and I didn't drink from 18 to 25. I was never sober. I was never clean, because once I stopped drinking, I remember the way that those opiates made me feel. I was familiar with Percocet. I was familiar with Oxycontin. And I loved the way that it made me feel. Where that led me, was, I think I started out, with the Oxycontin 80s. That was like the big thing back then. And I remember starting out as just having to do, a quarter of one. And, that led to doing half, and then that led to, doing a whole one, at least, an 80 a day. To where I was using any money that I could get, to feed my opiate addiction. And I, where that led me was that it was a crippling thing in my life, because it ran every single aspect of my life. It ran all mental capacity, all physical capacity, all emotional capacity was due, to my opiate addiction. I ruined a lot of relationships. I hurt a lot of families. I hurt a lot of friends. Because when I didn't have them, my body would go into withdrawal. That physical withdrawal for me was, diarrhea, cold sweat, chills, muscle spasms, all at the same time. So when I didn't have them physically, I felt like I was dying. So mentally, I was going to do whatever I had to do to make it stop. And that went on every day for years. I thought if I moved to Florida with a girl that something would be different, but I took myself with me. When I got to Florida, I ended up ruining that relationship. I lied and manipulated through that whole relationship for over 2 years. She never knew that I was a daily opiate user, because that's how good I can manipulate the people that were around me. She found out and she left. That left me homeless, 500 miles away from home. My day consisted of, having enough money to go to the methadone clinic in the morning, taking 150 milligrams of methadone a day for over a year, going and working all day in a restaurant, and using that money to buy Roxycodone 30s. Which eventually, led me to IV drug use. So then I was taking the methadone in the morning, going to work, buying, $100 to $200 worth of oxycodone and shooting it up. And that's something I thought I would never do. But that was the progression of my disease, the progression of the addiction. So once again, I was left at a crossroad, and I thought opiates were my problem. I thought that I need to get off these opiates. So I came back to Virginia. I put myself, through a detox for 5 days. I was in between the bedroom and the bathroom for 5 days. I didn't leave the house for a week. Once I got through that, my mind started to clear. I felt better. And I wasn't addicted to these opiates anymore. But then I thought it was going to be okay to drink. I started drinking, after not having drank anything for 7 years, and I picked up exactly where I left off. I picked up, and there I was, drinking a liter of vodka a day, taking the cap off when I got the bottle, so that means I would have to finish the bottle. And it led me, to drinking every day. And in my mind, I'm an alcoholic to my core, so I might as well start using drugs as well. So then it was just a vicious cycle of drinking and using drugs and doing anything and everything just to get more substances into my body. I had already crossed that threshold of IV drug use,
Hey,
so there was no way that I was going to do my drugs any other way. So that led me to, you know, a lot of injuries, a lot of stitches, a lot of broken bones, and I almost, you know, lost my arm to it, to IV drug use. If I hadn't went to the hospital when I did and was honest with them about what was going on, I definitely wouldn't have an arm, and I probably wouldn't be here. They got me in surgery. Within an hour, I was on an operating table, and they said if I would have came in any later, they would have amputated my arm. If I would have came in 12 hours later, it would have moved up to my neck, and I would have died. The insanity behind that is that I continued to use drugs after that. You know, that still wasn't enough. And I continued to use drugs and drink, you know, I think for 2 years after that. I finally had the realization, you know, that I was going to die. I had been through things, you know, where doctors, I drove to the hospital with a 0.4 blood alcohol content one time, and the doctor says, you know, you should be dead. You're going to die by the time you're 30. Another doctor told me that I was going to die or have a stroke because my blood pressure was too high on a separate occasion. There were so many different instances where these doctors were telling me that I was going to die. And I had seen so many of my friends die. A lot of the men in my family have died. You know, my grandfather, my uncle, my cousin, my great uncle. All these men have this Lucas male syndrome that my mom calls it, to where we die. We drink and we use and we die. And that's what was going to happen to me. When I reached out for help, I didn't have anything. I didn't have a dime to my name. I didn't have health insurance. I didn't have nice shoes. I didn't have nice clothes. I literally had nothing, but I had the sincere desire to change and the courage enough to ask for help. And when I asked for help, the doors kind of opened up for me in recovery. I moved from Blacksburg, Virginia to Northern Virginia, October 4th, 2016, and I decided to stay. Today I live my life in recovery. You know, I try to be part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. I try to turn my mess into my message. I try to help others, which, you know, honestly helps myself. It's all part of the process, and I'm lucky I made it out alive. You know, I think my first year sober, I lost, over a dozen people. I remember that I lost, more than one a month. Over the past, almost 3 years. I don't even know how many, and it definitely, since the time I started using, is definitely countless. And I don't want to put my mother through the same things that I've seen my best friends' mothers go through, or what my grandmother went through with my grandfather, or what my mom went through with her uncle. All these people that have died from this. I know I'm not any different, and I know I have to make a positive impact now to save myself and save other people. I'm very blessed to be here. I'm all for, helping this crisis and helping others, because I'm very fortunate to be able to live through it. I'm glad to be here.
Tom, tell them who you work for.
So I got introduced to Steve through a friend named Tom. Tom tuned into the live stream, but we worked with a nonprofit organization called Arise and Flourish. Arise and Flourish is based out of Montgomery County, Maryland. We go into middle schools and high schools and talk to kids about our real and raw experiences with addiction, and we explain the cycle of addiction. So we tell our real and our raw stories, and then we share with them on a whiteboard the cycle of addiction. And it's a little easier to understand when we show these kids this cycle in black and white, and we show them that there's only two ways out of it. You either die or you get help. We explain that they may not need this now. They may need it in a year, 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. Doesn't matter. The cycle is not going to change. The only way it's going to change is if we ask for help. We need to break the stigma of asking for help. People are dying. These kids are dying. My friends are dying. You know, and if we can change this one kid's mind to know that they can ask for help and to know that there's help out there, we can hopefully change the next generation and save some lives.
Why don't you also go ahead and show them your the product and the company you started?
Yeah, so when I was in rehab a couple years ago, I made this hat, and it said sober backwards. I'm not sure if this actually shows it the right way, but the business is called Rebos. So I made this hat when I got out of rehab, and it was simply just to help me, you know, and it said sober backwards. So when I look in the mirror, or when I pass a car in the parking lot, or pass a window at a restaurant, you know, I subconsciously think, you know, it says sober, and I'm proud of that. For over a decade, I could not look in the mirror. I was not happy with who I was. I was not happy with the person that I had become. But with the hat that I made, you know, I didn't even have to say anything, but it made me proud to be sober. And also it connected other people, whether I was at a concert, whether I was at a restaurant, whether you're across the street. You don't really know what it is unless you know what it is when you see it backwards, and, you know, it's pretty cool.
I would think our audience can see it backwards.
Cool.
I think we're seeing the reflection from the camera.
All right.
But the hat does say Rebo, because it's actually sober backwards. It's actually very clever.
So he says he's reading sober. But
okay.
So there's the actual, what it looks like.
Hey
on the front
Tom,
of the
does
hat.
that read backwards now? Rebo, when he shows you the back of it?
But we aren't shipping online yet. We launched this year. We do have a website. It's getrebos.com. The Facebook is @getrebos, and the Instagram is @getrebos. So you're more than welcome to check it out. We'll be shipping before too long. But I'm new to all this. You know, I'm just now learning how to live. I'm 32 years old, and I'm just now learning how to live. But it's okay because I'm living.
Well, listen, I want to thank Frank for sharing his story with everybody. He's the kind of leader we need right now in fighting this community, especially relating to young kids. He's actually going to my old high school next week at Sherwood, and he's actually going to give a talk. Very proud to have met him. Very glad. This is going to be an ongoing relationship. Next week I'll have another guest on Lift the Stigma. We'll be live at 2 p.m. following Cheryl Spangler live at 12:30. Just remember two things, please, always. There's strength in numbers. Together we can make a difference. Keep God first, and everything else will fall into place. Thank you.